Good, good. We're going to go ahead and get started. We're missing two, but we do have a quorum. So we're going to get started, and we're going to open as we traditionally do with prayer and the pledge. So let's stand and we'll open in prayer. Heavenly Father, we come before you today and we just ask God for your involvement in our discussions, in our decisions. Lord, we ask that you would guide us. We ask for wisdom, Lord, in all things. Lord, I think about growth and the concern it is and how to do it, how to manage growth, how to manage our budget. All the decisions that we have before us, we just ask for your involvement, and we ask it in the name of Jesus. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Hey, Rick, could you do me a favor and send a couple texts just to confirm? Thank you. Okay, well, let's start with roll call.
Rodriguez. Here. Bruner.
Here.
Jingula.
Here.
Haverfield. Bauer. 3 present, 2 absent.
Thank you. So let's just get started with new business action item 1. This is to approve the 2022 alcohol renewals. And Shar, would you like to give us any background or share anything on this particular set?
Madam Mayor, this is basically the last batch before their licenses expire on May 31st, and none of them have points, so.
There we go.
Mayor, I may, because you have been kind of consistent, not going to talk about why I've been abstaining, but there's no liquor license for any restaurants here, right?
1, Craft Lounge.
Oh, they're a lounge though, aren't they?
They are lounge.
Okay, I'm okay.
Okay, would there be a motion? No, if it's our Civic Center.
Okay, well, I'll abstain again, so that's going to be it.
Just stay consistent. Okay,
Wait a minute. Mayor, I'll make a motion to approve the action item on the alcohol renewals for 2022.
Second.
it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Bruner.
Abstain.
Jingula.
Yes.
Rodriguez.
Yes.
2-1.
Okay, there we go. Okay, we're going to start. The next business item is 1-2 on the agenda, and this is the State Highway 16 update. Doug Critchfield and Rodney.
Madam Mayor, we need,
You might just, push it away. You just have it further away from you as you use it. Yeah.
we need Doug Critchfield to have the link. Mark, can you invite him? Thank you. It should just come on your Teams. Just go back over to Teams. There you go.
And while they're setting up, I will say, I don't have times on this agenda, but pretty much we have 2020, 2020 is on each one of our agenda items. We're going to have to push through because we have a lot on the agenda today. So, yeah,
Okay.
well, except for the first one isn't 20, so I think we only gave Patrick 15. Where's Patrick? Is he at, wherever he, yeah, okay. And he knows we'll have to be really fast. So we're going to go pretty quick. We've got a lot of updates, and Amy, could I have you do me a favor? Well, or maybe, I left my phones, and I just realized if one of our council members are... Oh, okay. And then Jacob? Okay. It's on their calendar, I think. Yeah, okay. Thank you. Good morning, Doug.
Good morning, Mayor, Council, and Commission. Doug Critchfield, review of where we are with Highway 16 and the specific area plan. This is the outline of the area that we're covering in this specific plan. It goes to Ustick Road down to Airport, from Robinson Road over to McDermott. We have JUB working with us on this project. Go ahead, Rodney. So there's also two other area plans going on at the same time. There's a Ustick corridor study for the Transportation Division. It's taking a look at the intersections and the roadways on Ustick. And then south of 84, Parametrics is doing a study for the Transportation Division. They are going to have some land use proposals with that that we will evaluate once we get that in July.
Doug, could you
Yeah.
tell us which, on Ustick, it's going from what to what on that particular corridor?
That,
Okay, perfect, Canada.
great, thank you. Go ahead.
Well, to McDermott.
To make
Thank you,
McDermott,
yeah.
Thank you. So I'd like to run through with you just a little bit on what's happening on the 16 project. Most of you are familiar that it's starting this year, but I just wanted to run through with you and show you what it is that we're looking at along this corridor. So the IDT is working on phase 2 right now. They're starting on the project on the south end of the project and working north. This is the current plan to cross over 84, and you can see the connections on the westbound and eastbound of I-84. Go ahead, Rodney. Future phase will show flyover similar to what the Boise 184 flyover looks like. And if you go ahead and move on to the next slide. This is our preliminary plans to connect to the South 84 right here. This is what we're working on right now with Parametrics. And go ahead, Rodney. And you can see from the parametric study, this is an option that we have out there. Transportation Department is still trying to figure this out. But connecting Stam and Airport Road with a connection off of Robinson, potentially a roundabout in the middle with a direct connect to I-84. Go ahead, Rodney. So as you go further north on 16, it will cross Franklin at 2 intersections that will be signalized in phase 2. Both southbound and northbound. And then phase 3 will have a bridge that will go over the top of it with connectors still be signalized at those intersections. And go ahead, Rodney. At Cherry Lane, there'll just be a bridge over the top of Cherry Lane. There'll be no connection there, so there'll be 2-mile increments between connections to surface roads. And go ahead, Rodney. And so the phase 3 will include a pedestrian and bicycle connection underneath. Next slide. At Ustick Road, there will also be a connection, 2 signalized intersections, north and south. And then Rodney, there'll be a bridge on phase 3 that goes over the top of this. I don't know the timing on phase 3. We're still working off of a phase 2 model that IDT has given us. Go ahead.
Doug, I have a quick question.
Oh, sure.
When you, later on, are you going to talk about the size of the parcels? Because, right, this is a great slide that shows us that, and it's just a reminder that there will be land available that is in Canyon County, in our impact area, that is on the east side of Highway 16. So part of the discussion really is how we're developing. And will you come back to a little bit of the why? Thank
Yeah,
you.
Yeah, you bet.
Thank you.
Okay, just quickly, Rodney, if we go up to, you can see in McMillan, go ahead and move northbound. Next slide. McMillan Road, you can see that there'll be, McMillan Road will eventually be, there's going to be a crossover in McMillan, a bridge over McMillan. Go ahead, Rodney. And there's also going to be you can see where 5 Mile Creek crosses under 16. There'll be a bike bed connection underneath the freeway at that point. Go ahead. At 2026, you can see where the signalized intersections are, and go ahead and move to the next slide. And then there's going to be an off and on ramp over 2026 in the future. Go ahead, Rodney, the next one. So as Mayor was pointing out, we do have, you can see the 16 in red there, and the circles indicate the intersections that will be connecting to Franklin and Ustick. We did a preliminary study on what's existing out there. The yellow is primarily residential. The blue is industrial. And you can see that there's some opportunities out there for development on both sides of I-16. There are some constraints with the railroad moving through of connecting, other than McMillan Road, of connecting north and south on that side, on the east side of 16. So that's a bit of a challenge for us. And then with the residential development, the county development that's occurred out there, it only allows for, again, some limited access north and south with roadways. So that's what we're working on right now. So we did an opportunities and constraints study, and on those opportunities, there's plenty of opportunities for connections, pathway connections. CWI has a campus just on the west side of this area study, and they're interested in gaining access off of Cherry Lane, which they weren't before. They have a new president, and they have some new ideas for building out there. So we're working that connection in right there. And then from the Owyhee High School, Rodney, if you can bring that cursor up there, Owyhee High School, Owyhee Storm Road, there's strong capacity to connect down to Cherry Lane at that point. And so Cherry Lane has a lot of opportunities for commercial and industrial park type of development. There's good access on those sides. Also, south of Ustick Road, at that intersection where 16 crosses there's some great opportunities as well for industrial park and high-end type of development near the high school. A little bit further south, if you go down to the Franklin interchange, that's developing pretty rapidly in industrial development. And so our task is to ensure that that is the highest and best use and that it has those elements that we're looking for in a good quality industrial park type of development. So this is where we are. Go ahead, Rodney, go to the next slide. And so what we've started to do is started to outlay some potential land uses on this corridor, the yellow representing industrial park and the blue is residential. The orange is commercial potential out there. We'll be bringing this back to a committee. Go into the next slide, Rodney. We've also had another review from another set of planners that were looking at this with some other options. I'm sorry, these are all the same color. It's hard to see, but it's a similar type of a layout. We're seeing some patterns starting to develop. We'll be bringing this on the 16th of June to the second meeting with a steering committee that we've assembled. We're also currently, if you go to the next slide, Rodney, you can see our timeline. We're working with landowners right now and having those interviews with the landowners in the area and developing concept alternatives. And we'll bring those back to the steering committee.
Are you having JUB give us a mix of what our current industrial and commercial and residential is in that area and north of the freeway? Because right now we have a lot of industrial, and I think we need, and I'm going to go back to the storage units that people didn't like me talking about, but we need to be careful of our mix. And if we have too much industrial and not enough commercial, and I'm also thinking office space, because that corridor can be a beautiful corridor for office buildings.
Yes.
And I know there's a hesitancy in major offices, but are they looking at that just to make sure that we're careful on our mix?
Yes, we're not only looking at land uses, but we're looking at development types along that corridor. So right along with what you were saying there, we are looking at the 10-mile road is a very good example for us, that development, and we're utilizing that and some of the examples off of that for office type of development. So.
Awesome.
And Mayor, I would just say that there's got to be some transitioning in some of this,
Correct.
right? And so, yeah, we're still, as staff, we're still recommending some additional industrial, but we have to transition from the existing Lactalis and railroad and all of that.
Right. Well, we've got quite a bit in that area, and so one of the thoughts is we could transition from commercial to multifamily to single family too, where there's, and so I know Cliff is working, I've asked him to, there you are, Cliff, good morning, to really work on the assessment of what our business mix is. And right now, this is a really critical time that we get that mix right, because we can't change it once it's there. And so I think before we recommend, we need to know what we have as a whole across the city. So I'm hoping that that gets done before we move, even before our next meeting.
Yes, and that's part of our opportunities and constraints
Yeah.
Evaluation that we're going through.
Thank you.
Just as a reminder, that steering committee hasn't even seen these. We haven't even
Right.
looked at them. So we've got a lot of work to do still. This is real high-level concept based on staff looking at it, a couple of different groups looking at it, including JUB.
Good, thank you. Well, I look forward to seeing the assessment.
Mayor, clarification on the impact area. So originally I was thinking, but I guess they have decided or have not totally decided, 16, moving all the way to the freeway, that pattern. Have they totally decided on that?
To
I
the-
thought our impact area was going to be on the west side of 16, but what I'm hearing now is it can go on the east side. So where does Meridian and
McDermott,
McDermott? So 16 is going to go west of McDermott.
Yes.
So that's where we're talking about, because I was thinking that we were just totally on the west side of 16.
Yeah.
That is no longer, or I miss.
well, and it's really important, because that is very developable ground.
Yeah.
That as you get closer to I-84, it begins at McDermott at 2026, and then it angles, and so it creates this area. And that's why this particular, it goes back to the why are we doing this? Infrastructure is critical. And the more land we lose in our impact area, that's a property tax base. And so we have to be planning.
No, I love
Right.
it. I just, Meridian, and Meridian is, we're okay with Meridian and everything, that McDermott is the,
Yeah, it has
Yeah.
been for a very long period of time,
Okay.
and the only question is infrastructure. On the east side of Highway 16,
and Star's not entering into this, right?
I can't predict what Star is going to do.
yeah.
All right.
Thank you, Mayor
Councilmember,
Kling.
yes.
One thing we haven't talked about, at least maybe I missed it, but land acquisition on Highway 16 and on Ustick. Is the city involved in any of that at all?
IDT has been negotiating those
Oh, have
land uses along there, or the purchase acquisition along there.
I see. So all we do, the city, not all they do is annex the road, the property that ITD is annexing, going after.
Yeah, they sell the property to IDT for the purposes of building the road.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
But just for clarification, we're not annexing that right-of-way unless it's contiguous to another property, and they are requesting that annexation. And at this point, they're not. So there's not annexation going on just for State Highway 16.
okay, like on Ustick Road, where we'll be doing some infrastructure development, is that involved in that as well, or not?
I'd have to defer to Daniel on that question.
Mayor, Councilman Rodriguez, the infrastructure we've been looking at in Ustick is obviously the sewer going down that way to be able to open that area up for development more. That would be, at this point, in Highway District right-of-way, not annexed right-of-way. We're obviously working with the Highway District on a number of issues. And ultimately, when we get design and we're closer to construction, we'll be discussing that with them as well.
Yeah, so one of the things that I'm concerned about is if ITD works with the Napa Highway District, and I just want to be careful with the Napa Highway District increasing their tax base and making us pay more than, plus double down on the other costs. You know what I mean? It's,
Understand. The development of Highway 16 should not have any significant impact between the Highway District and us. We've both been involved in the discussions of the underlying roads for Ustick, Cherry, Franklin, and what those will look like, recognizing that they're in the Highway District now, but ultimately they will be city facilities. And so the state is working with us to accommodate what our development standards would be in those areas.
okay, thank you.
Thank you. Doug, thank you. I really appreciate this update. Council, I think it's important, we just want you to know what's going on and the why. So on the Houston corridor, which we haven't talked a lot about, the area master plans, specific plans, are critical for the developers to know what we as a city are wanting to see there. And that's one of the things that they have said to us is, please tell us what you're looking for. This is developing so rapidly, and probably the biggest issue on Ustick has to do with the density that we do on that corridor. I think, would I be correct? I mean, I think that's where we are, and right now we have certain zones there, but density is going to be critical. And we need to make a decision around that density, and if we need to make any changes to our plan based on what we're seeing come in and where we are with growth.
Yeah, Mayor, thank you. The JUB is working on a project just north in Ustick on that intersection of where 16 and Ustick are going to be. And it's a fairly dense development that's going in. Meridian is showing on their future planning density along that corridor. So we're evaluating that and what the density should be on our side of the road as well. And that the high school is driving a lot of that. Again, the pace at which this is going, just staying in front of it is a real challenge. And so we've had to hold off a couple of individuals that have been looking to develop that and so that we can get this evaluation done and take a look at those densities.
Thank you. And for council, just to make sure everybody understands that on Ustick, at Highway 16, the north side of Ustick is Meridian, the south side is Nampa, and that goes over to Canada. And so so that's why that Ustick corridor and the infrastructure, because there are people that have already asked Meridian if they would annex them in our side, and it's important that we have infrastructure going there, and we need it for other reasons.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's an important project. Wanted to make sure council was aware.
It'd be a great place for an apartment complex.
My guess is there will be.
Mayor, my understanding, though, is that folks can ask, and then there again, Meridian's going to hold the line that they're going to deny if, because I know.
That is our gentleman's agreement, I'll put it that way, that we have had, both with Mayor Tammy and with Mayor Simison, that will honor each other's area.
And I understand the incentive is to get the infrastructure in there in a timely fashion so that they will not be more incentivized to ask Meridian or
Absolutely.
whoever.
We've got to get the infrastructure there. Otherwise, you have developers wanting to come in and they don't have any way to do it unless Meridian provides it. So, thank you.
Great. Thanks,
Appreciate
Mayor.
it. Thank you very much. Okay, the next discussion item is the street improvement impact fee. Daniel? I want to say thank you to our planning and zoning team. We want you guys to be aware of this work that's being done and kind of what the thoughts are, because obviously we want alignment as we're thinking about where we're going, why we're going, where we're going. And there is, needless to say, we're hearing, and you guys are too a little bit, but the concern over growth is really, really frustrating the public. And so we need to come up with a plan, and this is really zeroing in on specific areas that we know that we've got to have a really strong plan in. So anyway, thank you guys for what you're doing, because I know you're hearing the same thing we're hearing, which is challenging. Anyway, Daniel, thank you.
Mayor, Council, so today wanted to talk a little bit about road improvements and what are currently required by developers and what the future plans for construction of the improvements that are not required by the developer are, and then potentially some changes to those requirements. So as we talk about this, the things that I'm going to go over is our roadway classifications and how those work, where those are at, because that plays into potentially some of the changes that we're talking about in the impact fees as well as the required improvements. And so then go over the current requirements and then some of the proposed changes. So our roadway classifications, there are three main classifications that the city deals with: arterial roadways, Those are our high-volume regional roadways. Some examples would be like Midland, 12th Avenue, Middleton Road, Happy Valley, those type of roadways are our arterial roadways. And then we have our collector roadways, which and on this map, the green and the red are our arterial roadways. The collector roadways are more those medium volume roadways that feed from the residentials into the collector roadways that then take you to the arterial, the main thoroughfares. And those are purple on the map. And then our local roadways, those are just our residential or commercial roadways that you'd see similar to just where your house is, or some commercial Treasure Valley Marketplace, Marketplace Boulevard, those kind of things would be the local roadways that we'd be talking about. And so the roadway classifications, as we look at them, arterials are typically 100-foot total right-of-way, 50-foot from either side of the section line. Collectors are an 80-foot. The arterials, typically you'll have a 5-lane configuration with either bike lanes or potentially side paths, some form of pedestrian bicycle improvements for those as well. The collector roadways are typically like a 3-lane roadway. An example would be Greenhurst that we built recently. Portions of that are a collector roadway. So you have your 1 lane of travel in each direction and a center turn lane typically. Might have bike lanes, might have side path, just depending on the what the master plan calls for in those areas. And then our local roadways, you have a few different right-of-way widths on there. Our standard one is a 56-foot right-of-way, allows for a landscaping strip and detached sidewalks. We have some standards that allow for attached sidewalks or down to a smaller roadway with a 44-foot minimum, sidewalk on one side, no parking on those. That's allowed in infill developments to help with some of the challenges that we have on infill, where you have smaller lots or odd-shaped lots. It helps make the projects economically feasible so that we can get some of those infill projects done. And so as we look at what our current requirements are for the developers, their current requirements are that on both arterials and collectors, they donate the right-of-way for full build-out. They do the widening as needed if their traffic study calls for a turn lane or something of that nature. They do those improvements. They put in sidewalk, and then they do the borrow ditch for the storm drainage. So they're not putting in curb gutter. They're not doing full widening along their entire frontage unless for some reason their traffic study says that's warranted based on their traffic. On local roadways, they do their full improvements, curb gutter, sidewalk, storm drain, streetlights, everything. And then in addition, they pay street impact fees that go to pay for intersection improvements that are identified in our capital improvement plan, and road widenings that may be identified in there or would be identified in the future as needed. Those impact fees can pay for those improvements. I see a question.
You can tell I've got a question. Detached sidewalks, so we do not require detached sidewalks, correct? Or do we?
Detached sidewalks are required on the main roadways, so the arterials and collectors. On the local roadways, they are required as you come into the subdivision. And then there is an allowance that once you're internal to the subdivision, attached sidewalks are allowed. And it's honestly up to the developer, can choose which way they want to go. We see some come in with detached sidewalks throughout the entire development, and some that have that beautification there on the entrances. But as you get internal to the subdivision, that's not a requirement. And that's something Cliff's talked to me about, and we are updating our development standards, our engineering process and policy manual and that's where those things are. And so we'll be discussing that as a potential change to remove that potentially or not, and that will be a future discussion.
Is that discussion, does it have any bearing on this discussion with, it doesn't, and the cost to developers, it really doesn't tie in at all? As far as
There-
the cost and the requirement to go detached versus?
There is increased cost to the developer to do detached sidewalks, mostly in land costs, because the right-of-way for a attached sidewalk roadway only needs a 50-foot right-of-way, whereas it needs to be a 56-foot if they're detached sidewalks. And so there are some cost implications and, you know, density implications there, but they don't bear on necessarily what we're talking about today.
Thank you.
And so those are what currently the developers are required to do in their, when they come in for a development. The street impact fees versus the improvements, we looked at kind of what the value of the impact fees we collect versus the value of those improvements that are being done. And that's kind of what prompted this, as Jeff was looking at what we're bringing in impact fees and what we potentially have to outlay for improvements later on. We're currently, our impact fees are mainly funding intersection improvements. The widening of the roads is not something that's necessarily warranted or needed today if we can get those intersections taken care of. So those are our bottlenecks today. As we continue to grow and as we take care of those intersection projects, at some future time, we would have impact fee projects on the capital improvement to do those widenings. But that's not something that's needed today. And so the capital improvement plan is focused on the needs that we have today. And so as we looked at we looked at just basically 2021 and the plats that came in and were recorded in 2021. So if we look at assuming all of those lots got built in 2021, we would be collecting just under $3 million in impact fees. As we looked at the cost of improvements associated with those developments for arterial and collector roadways based on the costs we've been seeing in our construction projects, we estimate the cost of the arterial improvements for the plats that we did in 2021 at about $1.3 million, and the cost of the collector improvements at about $1 million. So as we look at that and look at the needs, the concern was that we were not collecting enough impact fees to offset those construction costs that we would have an obligation for in the future. So that's just some context there. So going on to kind of what we look at for the possible changes.
Mayor, if I may interrupt. Yes. I was never a math major, we are all aware of that, but that's not adding up. The cost, because we were collecting almost 3 million, and then I'm only seeing 2.3 million of expense.
Okay, yep, so
Let's talk about our intersection improvements.
Yes.
Thank you.
So the cost of those arterials and collector improvements are not what we base our impact fees on. We base our impact fees on the capital improvement plan that we have for the impact fees. So at this point, let me pull up that map here.
And one way maybe to shorten it, and Daniel, please correct me if I say this incorrectly, is that right now our impact fees are only covering intersection improvements.
I heard that.
Right, so, and the cost of just the signals and the intersection improvements exceed what we're collecting, and then you add on to that these improvements. So it's, I know what you were thinking,
this
because
is
I was
beyond
thinking,
that,
it's
okay.
beyond.
Right, there are more things that the impact fees pay for. Currently, it's paying for these intersections. This is the impact fee map that's currently in effect. We've got one that, once we adopt the new impact fees, some of these drop off that have been done, and we add some others. But so you can see the vast majority of the projects on here are intersection projects, not widening projects.
And later on, just so my mind doesn't forget, I want to talk about Midland further too,
Okay.
just in,
All right.
no interruptions now on that.
Yes.
I'm late to the party, but sorry about that. Example, Greenhurst Road, Summit Ridge development. The northwest corner of that intersection, when Lakeview Bible was done, full frontage improvements, curb gutter and sidewalk,
Those were the requirements at
Right.
that time, yes.
road widening. So on the opposite side, now that Summit Ridge has come in, the difference as far as development as far as for road access is at the main entrance point, a sidewalk that's detached, and a rural road section. The road widening, I can't remember if there's anything there for a deceleration lane.
They were, on that one, there was enough width because of the widening that had been done with the Sands Point, that they were able to do the turn lanes without needing to do pavement widening. Had that not been the case, they would have done some pavement widening for the turn lanes there. And then, yes, they did sidewalk along their entire frontage.
So the concern that was expressed as far as of traffic up and down Greenhurst, especially now contributed by the Summit Ridge residents, people that were, that we heard from, you're saying that if we would have been under the old impact fee approach, full frontage improvements would have been made. A traffic study, I would assume, has been done on that. So at this point, focusing on other intersections, we're not in a stress point on Greenhurst for not doing the full and frontage improvements.
Correct. The portions in between the intersection there's plenty of capacity for the vehicles we are seeing there today. There was not a need to have that full widening. We don't need 5 lanes there. There's not enough traffic volume to warrant it. It just is extra pavement we have to maintain that we don't need today.
So the extension of the conversation then is, in the future, when it is needed, that's like
Impact
the
fees.
city's paying for it because the developer's no longer responsible for frontage improvements.
Impact fees will pay for those widening portions from future collection of impact fees will be able to pay for that. When we rebuild the road, obviously, there's the center section that's existing pavement that the city will have to cover, but the widening portions can be covered using impact fees that we would collect in the future.
So Mayor, my concern in the future, obviously, is just the defensible position we have today. We're using impact fee, we're deferring to other locations of need, knowing that the current stress point isn't there yet, but in the future it will be. And we've already collected the impact fees for the road widening. The developer won't be responsible for that at all in the future.
So
That's the discussion today that we're going to get to because of the proposed changes to that. Because based on the cost of this, we're not able to get to the road widenings for a long,
Right.
long time.
And that's
so
where the
we need,
concern.
right, we're going to suggest that be changed.
Okay. That's, I think, where the people that came in and expressed a concern about, you got all these new houses, but no new road widenings. You got maybe an entrance point that's been improved, but that's about it, and a sidewalk, so.
And Mayor, Councilman Haverfield, that's fairly typical, not just in our jurisdiction, that the impact fees that we are collecting are not spent for those improvements right in front of those developments unless there's a need for them today. It's future impact fees we're collecting would be paying for that widening when it is needed based on the growth.
So is Greenhurst considered an arterial? Because I heard you
Portions.
It's a collector.
Portions of Greenhurst are a collector, portions are an arterial.
I thought I heard you say that full frontage improvements are required on arterials and collectors, not
No,
locals.
that's currently only sidewalk and turn lanes, if warranted, are required on collectors and arterials today. So the possible changes that we talked about internal, we're going back to requiring full frontage on all roadways, collectors, arterials, as well as the locals. That's one option. The the issues we run into with that is we get what we have on Middleton Road, where you'll have development and you'll have some widening, but then it goes back to a two-lane section. You'll have some widening, goes back to a two-lane section, and we're not truly able to utilize that widening until the full roadway goes through. There's not a benefit to traffic to have that widening happen unless we're going to have a continuous widening throughout the entire area, because you don't get any utilization of that lane. The pavement sits there, we still have to maintain it, but it doesn't benefit the traveling public. And so that's one of the drawbacks of that. Some of the pros for it, you know, it's done, it's waiting, you know, at some point in the future, we will have less cost to have to widen the portions in between. But we've expended maintenance costs for that pavement for however long that takes for us to do that, that may offset those savings there. So one of the, another option that we looked at, and this is likely the one that staff would recommend, would be a combination of partial and full improvements, where we would be looking at requiring full improvements on collector roadways that are less regional. So the arterials are the more regional routes. So we would require full improvements along the collector roadways, and then stay with this, what we have now for the arterial roadways, where those regional routes would come up in our impact fee list as they are needed, and we would build those with the impact fees that we would be collecting at the time of that capital improvement plan when they're warranted. And then obviously the other option would be not to change anything and leave it the way it is today. As we look at that middle option, you know, that's where we kind of looked at this cost. That's pulling approximately half of the roadway costs that we see coming back onto the developer and off of the future impact fees. And so I think that's what staff, as we've looked at that, what we would recommend proceeding with. We've had some conversations with the developers. There was some pushback when we talked about potentially going back to full frontage improvements with the amount of increase that's happened with the impact fees over the years. There was some concern over you know, having that large of an increase and then putting all of those improvements back on them. So if we can get some direction on which way you would like us to proceed, we'll go back and talk to the development community. And I think we can probably get some buy-in on the combination where we're putting collectors back on them, but leaving those arterials, those regional roadways there for the impact fees to widen in the future.
So Daniel, based on that, the understanding is that if you have the second one, combination, partial and full, and we would not change our impact fee for streets, it would stay pretty similar.
We would not need to change the impact fee. The impact fees that were proposed at the Planning and Zoning and the Impact Fee Committee would not need to change. We would still need to bring that back and have the public hearing before City Council. That there was a slight increase from the last one that is more dealing with you know, the inflation and that type of stuff. So we would be looking at $3,000 a lot for street impact fees.
Not change, not an increase of 3,000 per
No,
lot.
no, it's
Right,
to
because
3,000.
the change that
The
we're
change is
talking
a
about is
Few
very
hundred,
minimal.
Couple $100, yeah.
On the street impact fee, it's very minimal. So it would pretty much stay the same with just a slight increase, but then we would go with number two. If we had no change, we need to know how far out are we on some of these improvements, because even not having the full frontage improvements on the arterials, it still puts them out for quite some time, because we do not have the funds to get those done. And so,
And they're currently not needed as we've looked at that.
Okay.
You know, as we look at our updating our transportation master plan here in the next couple of years, that's where those analysis will be done to say, okay, these are the road widening projects that are needed. These are the signals that are needed still, and that feeds into our capital improvement plan that then the impact fees can fund.
Okay. Thank you for that clarity. So needless to say, the first time you visited with the developers and suggested this change, they weren't too happy about it. That's why we paused. But what we're hearing our citizens say is, we really have to have growth fund growth. And when we don't have the funds in our impact fees to cover anything beyond signal improvements for a very, very long time, is that a correct statement?
So yes, and I will say that we had a lot of discussion with ACHD, who has a much more, their impact fee program has been around a lot longer than the cities. And as we talked to them and talked how they started out with their impact fee, we're in the early stages that they're well past those early stages. When they implemented their impact fees, they were doing the same things that we were doing, where they were taking care of intersection projects. That's where their needs were. And so as those intersection projects were done, that's when they were able to drop those off of the capital improvement plan and add those widening projects on. And so as we talked to them, that's what gave us a little more comfort as well, that we're just in the growing stages of our impact fees. You know, we've had them for a number of years, but you know, the first number of years that we had them, they weren't funded fully. They were, you know, the recommended amounts were cut in half. And so we didn't collect as much, so we weren't able to do as much. And so we're growing the program, and that's how they experienced it as well, that they were doing intersections. And once those were completed, they were able to start doing the widening projects. ACHD's program is set up the same as this combination, where their collector roadways are fully done by the developers, and the arterials are taken care of through the impact fees in Ada County.
One last question, because there may be others. When are we anticipating, based on the current impact fee collection rate, getting through our intersection improvements? How many years is that?
So you can see there are a number of intersections that are identified for improvements there. I don't have the actual, so you can see we're looking at the current capital improvement plan. You know, we're looking at 2029 for most of these improvements through there to have them completed, assuming that growth stays strong and we have those impact fee collected. If growth tails off, those improvements aren't necessarily needed as soon because we're not growing as fast. And so that's the other advantage that the impact fees have, is if growth speeds up, we build things faster. If growth slows down, we build them slower, but they're not needed as soon either. And so that's likely when we would be looking at, you know, as some of these drop off, we will likely add other improvements on there. So other improvements will probably get onto that list before that 2029 portion.
But the road widening, if it's going to take us through 2029 to get intersections done, the road widening doesn't really begin. You may get it on the list, but the road widening then will possibly be beginning in 2029 and tailing in.
And it could be sooner. It really depends on when we do our transportation master plan update, what the needs are shown there. If widenings are shown as needed over other improvements, those would move
Over
up the
intersections.
list. Yeah,
Okay.
those
We
could
could
move
adjust
up. It's really just what are the priorities and the needs. So it's not necessarily that there would be no road widenings happening until all the intersections are done. It's what are the needs and what are the priorities in those needs that we would look at in the transportation master plan that council, you know, is involved in as we look at those capital plans.
Okay, council, yes.
Thank you, Mayor Kling. So Dan, the problem being is that we've got such a huge increase in population on the west side of Nampa, and now on the north side of Nampa. And those roads, the collectors or arterials, they're just as clogged up as anywhere else. Based on what you're saying right now, we're looking at 10 years before we can even think about widening, especially Middleton Road or Midland.
So Mayor, Councilman Rodriguez, I will say that the two-lane roads that are there today have adequate capacity for what we're seeing and what's being approved within the growth cycle there. The intersections are where we back up. It's not necessarily those two-lane roads. So what we're seeing today, those roads have the capacity in between the signals that they need. It's the intersections that we need to have addressed, similar to like Lake Lowell Midland there, or Lake Lowell Middleton. You know, there's plenty of capacity as you drive up and down Middleton between the intersections. Once we take care of the intersections, things are flowing very nicely and you're not seeing those large backups. It's the intersections that are the issue today.
The other day, I was at the Treasure Valley Marketplace at 4:30.
I'm sorry.
I will never do that again.
We are currently working on projects out there to help. Matt Ricks, our traffic guy that we hired, he did some resig timing in there and took out significant delay in there. But there are, that is an area where changing the lane configurations, adding lanes is something that is needed, and we are working on those plans and how to get that accomplished.
Well, I'll tell you what, it took me 40 minutes to get home, and I could not believe it. And I was wondering about it, if you can speed up the changing of the light, but hey, there's cars still
And they
there.
have.
We did.
Oh,
We
you did?
took about 10 minutes of delay out between
did you?
Middleton and Midland.
Oh, I see.
In there.
Yeah.
When he did the retiming of those signals.
When are they thinking that they're going to have Middleton and Orchard taken care of?
The
finished?
latest I've heard from the highway district is that it is likely mid to third week of June.
Oh,
is-
really?
Is what I'm hearing.
Good. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilman Bruner, did you have a question?
Midland, and I'm being a little selfish here because Midland, I'm travel, but we're calling it an arterial. And you have, you're going south from Caldwell Boulevard to Orchard. It's 4 lanes there on Orchard, then all of a sudden it goes 2. And Roosevelt, I realize we're taking care of Midland and Lake Low, not with a roundabout as I wish, but with a light. But on Roosevelt and Midland, to me, we have a wasted lane traveling north because no one uses that. So we have 2 straight, then there's a yield once you pass Roosevelt, and there's a right turn lane there. No one seems to want to use that right straight lane. In fact, I've gotten a few middle finger waves when I use that on occasion. And so that's wasted. So are we going to expand because?
So, Mayor, Councilman Bruner, we are currently in the process of a corridor study on Midland that will identify what we can do along there. We've had work done on there on the design stuff before. Some of the challenges we run into is that there are a significant amount of driveway accesses there. And so some of the challenges we have is adding that other lane on the outside where people have to back out of those driveways makes that very challenging and potentially not safe.
Are we going to change it from out of an arterial and go more to Middleton? I mean, if you have an arterial, it doesn't make sense to me to have just 2-lane traffic.
And what I think we will likely end up doing is I think we will likely end up changing the lane configuration there and adding those lanes. It's how do we mitigate some of those safety issues? And so that's part of what the study is looking at that will likely be done in about 9 months and we'll be coming back
So
to
there
talk
may be a
about.
decision within a year or whatever, whether what's going to happen there.
Yep.
Okay, so we're about 15 minutes behind right now, so
Go, huh?
Daniel, thank you very much.
So I guess that what I would ask is, can I get a head nod on which direction you would like us to proceed? Okay, all right. The combination option? Okay. All right, that sounds great. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
That was a peace sign, but.
There you go. And then I know the first presentation that Doug did and Daniel's, is that something that maybe Shar, we can get to Shar and you could send to the council members?
It's in the, ours is in the.
Yours was in the packet. Doug's wasn't in the packet, though, I don't believe. Yeah. So thank you. We can get Doug's and send it out. Thank you. Okay. So vacant building code.
Yours is now down to 10 minutes, Becky.
No,
No, we're gonna make this short and sweet.
actually Doug's will pull a little bit off, so.
So, Mayor and Council, thanks for getting up early this morning. It's nice to see your bright, shining faces. On this vacant building code, I'm just gonna run through, just briefly to remind you that we're working at vacant building registry. It would be a registry mostly for life safety to monitor the buildings that are vacant and make sure they're kept up to minimum standards of the property maintenance code we've adopted and other building codes that we've adopted. We've had some discussion with the BID, and Matt Lind is here to have a few comments at the end of my presentation about this. But if you recall, we have quite a few different types of, let me make it actually a slideshow so you can see it. So anyway, we have quite a few vacant buildings that we've monitored over the years, some downtown. We have larger buildings like this, the Kmart. We have some buildings like the Simplot complex over off, I think it's off Middleton. And basically, we're targeting buildings that are maybe unsecured. There's no viable business owner or an absentee owner, and it's been vacant long enough that there really is no intention of using or rehabilitating the structure. So the biggest benefit to this is that we will be able to monitor both at the building department level and the fire department level what buildings are vacant to make it easier to fight fires in those buildings. On the Simplot building, there was a large fire, and it had been vacant for so long they had turned off the fire sprinklers. So it made fighting the fire and the building damage much greater because of that. So last time we talked, we were talking about maybe the concept of having more of a punitive fine for vacant buildings as a motivator for these owners doing something with their buildings. However, after talking to legal, that's not possible under state law. What we can do is we can charge an appropriate registration fee that covers our costs because we're an enterprise fund. And we would recommend a $500 per year for admin, processing, and inspection for residential. And for commercial, there's probably a few more hours in inspections and processing and discussing the case. So that would be more around $700. And that'd be an annual registration fee in order to pay our staff to monitor these buildings. And then as far as fines go, we already have fines adopted into our building ordinance for all of our adopted building codes, including the property maintenance code. And any violation of that code or refusal to bring a building in compliance with any of those codes is subject to a misdemeanor offense and a fine. That said, since I've been here, we have never, in the last 9 years I've been here, actually brought somebody up on misdemeanor charges. We usually can work it out. And usually by putting out a notice and order and having communication with owners on whatever the issue is, or developers or contractors in the construction process, we're able to talk it through and have people do the right thing. So this is in essence what we're proposing. It is a layer of oversight by the building department, but I think it will render big dividends, and that we'll be able to know where all of our vacant buildings are. That'll also help economic development if people are interested in redeveloping, and it'll help the fire department as well as far as monitoring these buildings. If they have a sprinkler system, the sprinkler system be kept up to speed. Heat would be kept up for that sprinkler system. We'd make sure the buildings are weather tight so that we don't have blight where the buildings just fall into disrepair. So I'd stand for any questions on that, and then again, Matt is going to weigh in on the BID's opinion of what this program would do for them.
Mayor. So Patrick, there currently isn't a listing for vacant buildings for the fire department to assess whether it's a controlled burn that they're going to go watch, or if it's truly fighting a fire to save the building.
Mayor and Councilman Haverfield, no, we do not have a registry of vacant buildings. We have a history that goes back maybe about 30 years and where we've issued certificate of occupancies for buildings. And we do have a certificate of occupancy application that people can come in and apply for to reissue a certificate of occupancy. And then we also monitor buildings and we tag buildings with a posting if they're vacant. That basically says, we notice your building's vacant, please contact the building department before you plan to reoccupy.
So they have to, again, worst case, Simplot, they weren't aware that the buildings were vacant and the fire suppression system had been turned off. They react to a 911 call for a fire. They get out there. They have to assess at that point whether there's a sprinkler system that's helping suppress the fire or not suppress. If they don't have, at least, Mayor, I think we need to have a registry of buildings to know that when a 911 dispatch happens and if, we send an emergency vehicle out there, that they know what they're facing. So if that kind of information hasn't been assessed and provided, they're at risk. More
They
so
are.
than they would have been otherwise. So I would totally agree with getting that much done as far as a part of this process.
So one of the things that we've talked about is actually having a business license required in the city of Nampa at a very minimal fee, but what it would do, especially from a fire standpoint, we would be able to sync our building records with businesses. One of the challenges we run into on a regular basis are that people move into locations and they don't think they need to do anything. And then after the fact, the building department finds out that someone's occupying a space, but they're not properly equipped for the business that they're doing there, and we don't know what's in that business. So I know that there's sometimes concerns over business licensing, but it would help with the vacant building side. It would also help with knowing what's in that building and when there's a change. And so we do have the software to implement that, but that's a discussion that we need to bring back in a future workshop to talk about implementing a business license to where it would really help us in the safety side with police. But go ahead, I'm sorry, I just wanted to share that.
Mayor, just quickly, I'm totally in favor of this, by the way, Mayor and Patrick, as far as the registration fees. Are we going to discuss at all as far as incentives for vacant buildings in downtown? This is not going to cause anyone to necessarily occupy a building. Or is that a whole nother discussion? I'm
No,
just
this
asking if-
discussion, the whole impetus for this was that we have vacant buildings sitting there, we need to deal with them. The hope was that we could put a fee, a vacant building fee high enough that it would incentivize them to do something with their building.
This
Unfortunately,
is not going to do it.
so, legal, thank you for weighing in.
Thank you, Mayor and Councilmember Bruner and Patrick.
Is that what's illegal?
So you have to look at fees and fines and taxes differently. And things that you charge people can be in any of those three categories. If you're charging a fee, then a fee has to relate to the cost of providing the service that you're rendering as a government entity. So Patrick's staff to monitor and check these buildings and whatnot, that's the fee you can charge. You can't charge a fee beyond that. If you go beyond that, then it's a fine. And if it's to raise revenue, it's a tax. And you can't charge a tax without an election or statutory authority to do it. So if you want to charge something that says fill your building, then you have to pass something that says you have to engage in efforts to lease your building. It can't be vacant for a certain period of time or you're fined. That's what you're talking about.
And that has to go through the public vote?
No, the tax has to go through the public vote. So if it's a revenue generator, which this isn't really a revenue generator, this is more of you want to put some kind of incentive penalty. If you do that, you have to pass a code that says, okay, your building can only be vacant so long until you're fined, or you have good efforts to try to lease it. So that's the kind of government that you're talking about, that you would need to impose a fine.
So,
Go ahead, sorry.
Okay, so the difference between Patrick, the direction you were moving, and Todd, what you're talking about, because that's where the intent is to go there, and you're saying that we could do it if we passed a new code. Is that correct?
Madam
Or
Mayor,
ordinance?
You would need something to say, you have to do these things or you're subject to a penalty. And in imposing that, you have to, there's a constitutional standard to do that, because free exercise of property is a right of citizens and businesses. You also, as a government entity, have the ability, if you have a sufficient purpose, to impose upon those rights. The challenge with creating a particular ordinance that says you have to lease your building within a certain period of time, what's the appropriate time? What kind of efforts would that business need to engage in to not be subject to a fine? And defining what those reasonable efforts are, and enforcement, those are all issues that would go into that. But you can't just charge them a high fee to incentivize them. You have to have something that they're required to comply with and that they're not complying with to impose a fine.
Can that be applied in the downtown and/or historic area and not across the entire city, or does it need to be applied across the entire city? Can you, and then you also have residential versus commercial, right, buildings?
That's, Mayor, something we'd have to look at a little bit. You have to be careful that you're treating everybody the same, or reasonably the same. And saying that you're only going to enforce it in certain areas for vacant buildings adds more questions to the enforceability of the ordinance. So my advice would be to try to make it across the board if you can. I think you could probably distinguish between commercial and residential. Those are different types.
Next question.
Yeah. So I think what we need to do, because this is newer information today, we need to come back. I think we need to look at how we can apply it and what we can do. And so at this point, we need to come back before council on it. But I would like to give Matt an opportunity very quickly, if that's okay.
And-
Just very quickly to come and share really the pain point that you guys are experiencing.
And Mayor, we'll go back and we'll talk with legal. They're already, Todd's office already starting review on our ordinance, so we'll likely be coming back with a solution to that now
Yeah.
that we know what the ground rules are.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Everybody has a solution. Is it the right one, though?
All right, good morning. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Patrick, thank you for you and your team, the work you've been putting in on this. The issue of the vacant buildings is actually a big one for us in the downtown business community. Right now, one of the biggest barriers to growth we have is a lack of inventory in downtown buildings. We even have businesses who are interested in coming, but there's just a lack of overall places to put them. Adding on to this challenge is the absentee owner issue that comes along with the vacant building problem. And what that results in is continued growth of blight in our downtown. The same absent owners who are not filling these buildings are not maintaining their sidewalk areas, not maintaining their facades, and overall contributing to that broken window issue we're having downtown. I was hoping for a more leverage, I would say, out of this vacant building ordinance, but I can understand there are legal requirements that keep us moving in certain directions. However, it is exciting to hear that with what Patrick is putting in place, we may be able to fund proactive code enforcement in our downtown area. We've been suffering from that recently. As you well know, a lot of the city departments are pretty understaffed. And anything we can do to help create a fee structure that gets proactive enforcement downtown is something that our businesses are very much behind. We held a special meeting of the BID membership earlier this year, and one of the things that overwhelmingly came forward as a concern from our membership was interfacing with the city to address this very issue. We're going ahead and putting some measures in place on our side as proactively as we can, but I was asked to bring this to you all and say that the membership overwhelmingly supports moving forward with proactive enforcement, fees, et cetera, to help incentivize the filling of these buildings. Anything else I can help address? Or are we good?
We're going to keep working on it. And Matt, thank you for your leadership. Really appreciate the engagement. You know, I'm just thinking about on the Saturday cleanup, that you're spending time sweeping the sidewalk in front of the vacant building. Of course, there's no representation from the vacant building owners, and those aren't getting cleaned. And we really are trying to incentivize local owners sweeping their sidewalks, keeping them clean. But we had our cleanup day, which we need another one, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
and-
because there weren't enough people there to help that day.
Right, and at this point, if you look at just the unfilled units with, I'll say the four main empty buildings in our zone, we're looking at we're missing out on 35 members of the business community that could be downtown contributing, helping build a more beautiful and vibrant environment.
And Mayor, future consideration, but I would like to know what other municipalities, how they handle this. I realize we have maybe a larger challenge. I know what Caldwell, of course did, but you know, if there's other municipalities with this challenge and how they're handling as far as fees and ordinances and so on. So there's surely someone out there that is having this type of challenge. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Matt, thank you. We'll keep at it.
All right. Thank you, and thank you all again for your time.
Thank you. Thank you for coming out this morning. Okay, our next item is CDBG presentation, and Matt will have you go fast. You're
Mayor, Clean
That
Council.
was
Good morning.
awesome.
Talking in his sleep.
And I'm so sorry. We just, yeah.
So
You're good.
I'll go quickly. We're going to just briefly kind of talk about how we currently fund public service activities. We'll look at what those yielded, and then we'll look at some proposed options to maybe get some better variety in the future. Go ahead, Hannah. So right now, just as a quick reminder, we're talking about public service today. So we are capped at 15% of our overall CDBG budget. That's roughly right now about $114,000 a year. And then our current process, as you know, we put out a public call for applications. We receive applications. We risk rate, score, review them for meeting needs, and have capacity to perform the activity. And then we bring a recommendation to council, and then you guys allocate the funding out as you see fit. We found that to have some challenges as far as achieving a variety of applicants, achieving a variety of activities that we can help fund to meet the varied needs in the community, and specifically the things that we've identified in our consolidated planning process as a need that we want to address. So if you look at, this is the 5-year history of funding. We've basically funded rent assistance and utility assistance, rapid rehousing. We've done some victims of domestic violence support and senior support. And that's been pretty much all we've received as far as applications. And then we've, of course, funded them at varying rates depending on what they were asking for. But that over 5 years, we had some things in our consolidated plan that's ending. This is the last year of that we weren't able to address because we just didn't receive the applications. And so we're hoping to propose a new way to fund public service activities. And we've looked at some other communities, and they're all kind of a varied one. Most of them are similar to us, just an open competitive bid process or application process. And then some do what they call a targeted model, which Caldwell's that way. And I think they're that way because they were a new entitlement and they don't have a lot of service providers in their community. So they have to go and sort of encourage people to take on a task for them, and they help them build their program and start one from scratch. And so they've been targeting. So they just fund public service funding to a general bucket of money, and then they go out and find a partner to work with, and then they allocate the funding out at that point. And we're proposing today a sort of a blend of those two models. So we'd still have our competitive application round, but with the understanding that as we put funding into our public service activities, we will, let me sidestep 1 second. We're gonna, if you guys agree that this is a good way forward, we will build an entirely new application guidelines just for public service. We'll set an expectation in there of what our current 5-year goals and needs are. And then each year, as we come back to you to approve those application guidelines, we'll quickly review what we funded in year 1 of the 5-year plan. We'll identify the needs again. We'll address what areas we think we want to try to make headway in. And then we can put priority on those areas for this next application round. And so we can say anyone applying with this type of activity will get sort of a preference over any other, or it allows us to, if we feel like we're still not getting enough diversity and we can't find a partner, it allows us to reserve money aside and go out and, like Caldwell's doing and target somebody, help them build a program up to meet the need we have in our community. So it just gives us flexibility to go out and meet new needs, I guess.
Can I ask, because
Yeah.
thank you for going so fast. You can have a little more time, but
I-
I'm so, you're doing so good. Thank you, Matt.
Well, I got off script, so yeah, go ahead and
No,
ask.
you're doing awesome, and I'm so sorry. So just so that I'm clear,
Yeah.
on the targeted approach, if we were to go to targeted, could we as a council identify the greatest and highest needs in our community? And then, once we've identified what the greatest and highest need is, because right now, I feel like we've done the same thing year after year, right? We have the same applicants come in, and my understanding is the goal with CDBG funds is that you start up new things, right? That we don't, and we've talked about having people drop off and set out a year. But if we totally redid how we do our CDBG funds and do a pause and say, what are the highest and greatest needs in our community? Could we even target years differently? For example, in the 5-year plan, we could target 1 year and say, you know what, that 114,000 this year needs to go to X because it's our highest and greatest need, and let's go figure out how to get it done. The next year, we may shift it, or you may do a 50-50, but are we allowed to do it that way? Just to say, we want to just do some research and find out what we need in our community?
We can structure it any way we want. I think the reason we were leaning towards a kind of a blend of the two, where every year we could set aside some portion of that money. We're also recommending dropping from 4 recipients to 3, primarily because things are just getting more expensive, staff time's more expensive, actual direct benefit, rent, and utilities are all a little higher. So it's not going as far as it used to, but we're gonna also recommend that we go from 4 to 3 recipients, and we can always choose to reserve one of those aside. We can choose to reserve 2 placeholders aside to try to go find and identify and meet a different need. I think the trick with public service is that we are capped, and those funds cannot carry over. So whatever we give a subrecipient has to be spent in 1 fiscal year. So sometimes if we were to give 114,000, we would need to make sure that they had the ability to spend all that funding, or we just have to reallocate it to something new next year. But I'm happy to go either route. I think the reason we kind of did a blended approach is it still allows us the flexibility. My goal would still be to go out and find partners and encourage them to apply during the regular application round. And then we'd emphasize what we wanted to fund in our guidelines. So that particular type of organization would get preference over the others because we haven't met a need that in our community yet. So we would try to identify what we want to focus on this year in the guidelines each year. And then, so if we don't get any applications in and we said we wanted to fund, 2/3 of the funding to something like this, then we could just say we're going to only allocate to 1 this year and we're going to go after somebody with the remaining funds. So it would give us the flexibility to kind of do it any way we want, but we would set the expectation up in the guidelines. So as they're applying, they know that if they're not one of these 2 or 1 areas of interest this year, that they're not going to be the highest priority need for the city. And we can change that annually. So we can shift our focus around each year before we put out the guidelines and we request applications. But it also won't, it will keep those partners that we have in the community applying. And if we go to strictly a targeted, then my only concern there is that they would sort of stop applying and they would find other resources and then they might eventually move out of the community. So I liked having a little bit of money for a competitive, just to give them a chance to get some funding each year. But I more like the flexibility to go try to identify and address the things that aren't being met by the applicants, so.
I think for me, the highest priority, I guess I feel like right now, each year we just kind of, you get the applicants and it's what you do.
Yeah.
But we're not going through the process of saying, what is the highest and greatest need? And that's why we did a pause briefly to say, okay, we know that suicide and mental health is a big deal right now.
Right.
Are there, and we didn't have any applications, but some people don't even know about the applications. And so my hope is that we that we as a council have the opportunity to work and figure out, okay, how can we best know what our highest and greatest needs are, which we can work on that. And then let's agree as a council that let's go out and see if this is a need and there is a gap It's the community gap, right? And that's the assessment. Is there a gap in funding
Right.
that we can focus?
Yeah, and our previous council person, Jean Munchie, she has her ear to the ground, and she's out there, and I think she can help us. Of course, kids are priority. Mayor, I do have a off-the-wall question, which is nothing new, and maybe it's a legal question too. So I think the other council individuals, I assume, are also receiving an email from a lady for workforce housing. I've talked to you, Matt, just a little bit on that, and I'm putting her off. And I guess my question is, I take it, even though she's asking for 1.5 million and wants to meet individually with council people, I take it she's looking for some CDBG. My last put off was contact you, contact Doug, contact the mayor's office before I would even consider, and whether I can even consider it, because that may be a public hearing type situation. But I just need some advice on that. And she said she has talked to you, she has talked to Doug, she has not talked to the mayor's office yet. So how should that be handled? I'm not real interested in individual council people entering in on this solicitation process. So I realize that's rare, but it is for, you're aware of the situation.
I've just been copied on the email correspondence. They asked me
She
initially.
says she has contacted you, so I
Yep,
don't know.
she's emailed me, just wanting to know who was the best point of contact for the ARPA funding is my understanding of where.
ARPA, but I also,
Yep,
where
and they have an application in, the housing company, he does have an application in this year for some CDBG funding. With some of the changes that we're seeing or hearing that are coming down from HUD, I don't know that we're gonna be able to fund them because they aren't the right type of organization, and the things they want funding for, we think are not gonna be eligible.
The bottom line is, as a council person, should we be approaching, as this is an example of a situation that may happen in the future? I mean, I want to be kind, I want to respond, but I don't have that, I don't know how I should be responding.
If people are ever asking about housing, you're always welcome to just redirect them to me, and I can be the point of contact to try to get them in touch with whoever really, has the ability to talk through and make a decision, right? I can just guide them on making an application for funding from me, but I can certainly help direct them
And
to the right
ARPA,
city
that's why she had
department.
spoken to Doug, is because of the ARPA funding.
Yeah, and I think she's trying to schedule a meeting. I think what they're applying for funding for, I'm not sure from where yet. I was gonna actually try to circle back and get more information, but they're talking $50 million is what they're trying to apply for, but they're looking for ways to make their application better, yeah. So if they get community investment, I think it helps their applications. So, but the 50 million, I think that she referenced would be for workforce housing in Nampa.
So just so you know, I'm not aware of this at all. So
Yeah.
they have not reached out to my office that I'm aware. Rick, I don't know if so he hasn't seen it either.
It was gonna be my I actually talked with Robin about it yesterday. It's gonna be my recommendation. I was gonna email her and let her know to reach out to you guys, your office anyway, just to let you know what they're trying to do.
That would be
And
good.
just to let you know that they're potentially applying for this funding that could come to Nampa. So,
So the ARPA funding, we've already
That's what I
voted
thought.
to allocate our ARPA funding. And so that was done. We did hold back some funding for grant match for some big projects.
Yeah.
The question is, and this is something that we've all talked about, that infrastructure is we've got major infrastructure
Mm-hmm.
projects that have to be done. And so it's the highest and best use of
by all
those
means,
funds, and we have such limited funds. So I think it's just a discussion that we would have to reallocate funds.
Okay, if you contact, that's my answer, and I will pretty much say, hey, you talk to Matt, or you've already have, she says, but that's okay. She talks to
Yeah.
you, and if she emails me again, then I will just.
yeah,
Always feel
just to
free to-
find out who to talk to. And so I reached out to Doug. He said, yeah, have them reach out to me. I think he's just been busy with the budget, of course.
Yeah, well-
And
And so
actually-
they haven't had a chance. And plus, that's, from what I understood, and he told them, they pretty much allocated the funding, but he was just going to try to make some time to.
Oh, she's
In some
persistent.
regards, I would prefer they reach out to the mayor's email. That's why we have mayor@cityofnampa.us.
And that's what
That
I've asked her.
comes- Yep.
I asked her to do that, and she says she's talked to all parties except for what I suggested, the mayor's office, so.
Which is unfortunate, because I will say, staff is crazy busy right now, and when you get into lengthy calls like this, we could probably deal with it out of our office. And what we do is we track every call that comes in, and then we send it out, and we make sure it gets resolved. And so by going through Mayor at City of Nampa and Jonica receiving that, then we know what's coming in, we know what discussions, and we're also sending them out to department heads, and then we know if it's gotten resolved.
I don't
Yeah.
want to assume, but it's almost like she's going around, trying to get council persuasion, and I don't like
Yeah.
that type of approach. And I shouldn't accuse that, because I'm not for sure, but that's what I'm.
Well, that's what she's doing. I haven't talked with her, I just referred it to you, Matt, but also, Mayor, Matt, I want to talk to you about this. I've been wanting to talk to you about this for quite a while, so I want to ask you this. Is your direction for the council, is that slowing you down and making, are we holding you back by having to go through council every other day? I'm thinking that there's a quicker, more reasonable procedure that you can follow, that you don't have to have us every time you have an issue or a plan to make it simple for you just to go ahead and do it.
Well, I think public hearings are.
Yeah, it
You have
depends,
to have
it
it.
depends on the threshold of the money, the amount of
Oh,
money
is
we're
it?
gonna move around.
Oh, okay.
So when we're actually gonna look at changing that with our con plan process this year, we're gonna maybe look at our citizen participation plan. I think it's a little too restrictive on an already funded activity that we're just gonna add some money to. With the cost of construction and things, I think we're gonna increase the percent that would trigger a minor amendment to our action plan.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So that we don't have, and it wouldn't require 30-day notice just to add money to something already funded. It just came in a little high on the bids. So we're gonna make some modifications to more align with what other communities have done that wouldn't require that we have so many public hearings. At that point, it would just be an action item, and it would be a simpler process depending on the amount of money we move, so.
And then if you would clarify that with legal before we actually
Yeah.
do it, to make sure that we're
Yeah.
adhering to, it's just, it's guidelines, it's
Yeah,
state
I
and
know.
guidelines, so.
Yep,
Well,
it would be just a small change. It would be just modifying a percentage.
I was just always wondering whether we're holding you up by the red tape that's involved with CDBG funds, and I was just wondering if we could make it faster for you. That's all.
Well, most everything we do is, HUD would prefer that we do it out in the public eye so that we can
okay.
get feedback from the community.
So Matt, do you have the guidance that you feel like you need?
Well, what
on
I'm hearing, I
this?
think, is maybe not the hybrid, but just do a targeted. I think my goal is still to be, come to you at the time that we're gonna allocate with actual suggested end recipients. So you can vote on those. We'll try to target, in our application guidelines, we'll try to target the greatest need that we want to focus on.
Well, that's what I'd like you to bring to council. I'd
So-
like you to come to council
Yeah.
and let council help guide the need. And then you're going to know how to go out. So in some ways, it may be a hybrid model, but I think it begins right here in the
Yeah, and
future.
that's
Yeah.
our intent. So every year you approve the application guidelines. What we're wanting to do differently with that process is to come each year and do an update on what we funded in year one. In year two, as we're getting ready to go out for applications, I'll say, we funded this in year one. Here's what we've accomplished. Here's how much money we spent. Here's the needs we met. Here are the current 5-year consolidated plan identified needs. And so what you'll get a chance to when we're talking about the needs here at the end of June, we're going to open up for public comment on the con plan. And in that, you will all get to review the consolidated plan, see what needs have been identified by all the data and the surveys and all those things. And so they're going to be really broad so that
So
we can fit a lot of things underneath them. But
The council will get to approve the 5-year consolidated.
Yes.
And weigh into it during the process.
Yes.
So that they can be a part of it. Awesome.
And
That's
so
what I think
each
is
year we'll
important.
come back, say, we've met this need, we've met this need, we haven't met these three. Do you want, we know that there's a need in the community for this. Do you want us to focus on that this year? And you all can decide kind of what we want to make a priority in that year's application round. So when we send out the guidelines, it will be clear in there that we're saying this is an expectation, that we want to meet this need specifically. So anybody that's going to meet that need is going to have a priority over the other, theoretically, because we're going to basically rate based off need, capacity, ability to accomplish what they're going to set out to do, and eligibility and compliance, of course. But we'll kind of make a higher weighting on addressing a specific need at that particular year. So
Sounds great.
that would be our suggestion.
Council, are you good with it? Nod? Yep.
All right.
Matt, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
And,
very much. Good job.
You bet. Anytime.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to have a 10-minute discussion on budget, and then we're going to move to our ICRIMP report that will start at 20 till. And I appreciate Kelly being here to give us an update on our claims. But Doug is unable to be here this morning. And Jacob Bauer also texted, and why he's not here, which is unfortunate, but for him. But anyway, so had a little bit of a family emergency. So on the budget, I just wanted to give council a heads up, and without Doug here, I'm not going to go into we're not going to go into a bunch of detail. But as we're working through the budget process, one of the things that we've talked about was, Doug and I, in our long-term planning, is where we thought we would be. It would be a convergence of the impact of House Bill 389, assessed values, budget. And the thought was, boy, in 2025, we're going to be in a challenge. Maybe 24. Well, guess what? It's 23. It's this year. And the reason it's challenging is because of the assessed values. And so we've been getting reports, and we can't use, quote, numbers of where we're going to be, but the assessed values have gone up considerably. And we're still waiting to get kind of the blend from Steve Onofre with the county and then the assessor, and trying to figure out where it's going to be. Best case scenario, we're about $100,000 less than what we thought. Worst case scenario could be more than that. But at the same time, we've got a wage issue of employee retention. And so we've got to address the wage issue with our employees. And so I just want the council to know it's a challenging budgeting year. I had a discussion with police saying, the positions that they had asked for, pretty much the answer is no before you even get started, which is unfortunate, but it is. Sorry, Jason, maybe the first time you're hearing this, but or maybe you guys have had some working sessions on it, yeah. It's just unfortunate because the funds aren't there. But one thing I want council to know is that I know that, and I'm going to be really candid, sometimes when we run for office, we run saying we'll never take 3%. And I'm not asking you to take 3%, but I am going to say we're going to get away from talking percentages, and we're going to talk positions. Because for this year, it's like, okay, police, I'm sorry, possibly, no positions. Library, bookmobile, the library is extremely conservative fiscally in their positions and what they do. Very careful with their funding. They went after a grant for a bookmobile, which is awesome for our community, but they have to have positions to actually drive the bookmobile. And so some of our decisions are going to come down to, are we going to fund somebody to drive the bookmobile? Are we going to fund a position here? Are we going to fund the increases to retain employees? Because the need is greater than the budget capacity that we have. And so we're going to have to talk about that, and those are the kinds of decisions that we're going to come before you. We are asking every department to come in absolutely as flat as possible, right, without doing increases, other than just a cost of living to keep up, because we've got right now Boise and Meridian doing increases that are 7% and up. The state is 7%. And so when we have employees that, one, we can't recruit, and two, we can't retain, recently, and you maybe have heard me say this, we had, I know Tom has dealt with this, where we have other municipalities recruiting people out of our streets department literally by position. And when we don't have somebody to maintain the signals in the city of Nampa, we have to address that, because it's our lower wage employees that actually make sure that we have water, that we have wastewater, that our streets are functioning, and that our signals are working. So we have to have those, and we have to retain them. So this is a year that there is that convergent of a tight budget. And really it affects every fund, but the greatest impact is our general fund, because police is almost 100% of the property tax revenue that comes in. And then our state shared revenue has been up. It looks like it's flattening for next year, but we've got other increases that are going to come along. So for example, VRT, I know we've had a lot of discussion about VRT, but there's going to come a time that we have to pay our share of VRT, because Boise has been carrying a lot of it. And we'll talk about, are we going to drop off services? Well, when you start dropping off services, are we going to maintain where we are? Because if we only pay what we've been paying, we're going to have to drop services. And then you're going to have people that are saying, okay, what do I do, right? People that don't have cars, how do they function within our community? So these are going to be big decisions. And Doug and I have been talking about them. Candidly, they weigh very heavily on us. Jamie, we've been trying to, as many times as we have worked, Jamie has worked to look at wage equity across the Treasure Valley for employee retention and recruitment. We think we've got it, and then all of a sudden we're having to redo it because we're losing employees. We've got people pulling them out. And so we're trying to figure out how do you keep the city running? How do you keep the budget low? And I'm going to say, when people are complaining about property taxes going up, it's because the assessed values have gone up at crazy levels beyond what we would anticipate. So then their taxes are up, but the percentage of our budget going up is not what is impacting. It has to do with assessed values going up. And then the question that comes is, where's my money going? If it's not the city, where's it going? Well, and it has to do with the residential homeowners are paying, theirs has gone up. We haven't, the homeowners exemption has not paced, as you guys know. I think I'm sharing something that you know, but I'm stating it just so that we're all on the same page. When we got rid of the index with the homeowners exemption, it is not tracking with, the assessed value. Well, commercial's going down. So where's the money going? Well, ag and commercial are going down, and residential's going up. One area that directly impacts us as a city is that our airport taxes that we give back to the airport, their revenue has gone down, and that means it has to come from general fund. So to make it up, to keep their budget whole because the commercial's gone down so low, that's not something that we ever even considered impacting our budget. And it may be 20,000 here, 30,000 there, whatever, but it all adds up. So we are working, I just want council to know, we are working really hard on our budget. The one thing I will ask is please encourage, and I love our citizens that really want to know what's going on, but we need to let Doug work on the budget before we start asking a bunch of questions from the public. Because he is buried. I think you guys know that with Ed Caress having to step back, we had a good plan, and that was that last year through the budget cycle, we had hired someone for Ed's retirement, and that person went to another company to make considerably more money. And so this year, as we're stepping into this budget process, Ed suddenly is out. Doug is having to carry it and train new employees. So he is really, really busy, and he is trying to budget on a target because of House Bill 389, where we have to budget with the new levy rate. We don't know what the new levy rate is. And so we're throwing a dart at it, something that's moving continually. And our budget, I know people think, well, what are Boise and Meridian doing? They have bigger budgets. They took their 3% every year. And the $6 million that our citizens are not paying today is awesome, because that's between $100 and $400 a year that people are saving, but it also is budget capacity within the city. So we have been conservative, and it's really, really good. But this is a year where there's this convergence that we're going, doggone it, how do we make this work? And make sure that we can do what we need to do for employee retention, fuel costs that last year Ed Carras budgeted fuel at $4.50 a gallon, and I thought, whoa, that's kind of high. But I'm so thankful he did, because now we have to budget even higher. Utilities are going up, fuel is going up. Fortunately, we've had a really good, health insurance is good, and I think ICRIMP, I think we're in good shape there. So we'll see, anyway, it is what it is. So I just want you guys to know we're doing our best to come up with a really good budget that is conservative, but we also have to figure out how to make it all work.
And Mayor, I know we need to move on, but just quickly, and I think this council, and of course Dale being new here, I think we'll do what we need to do. I can't speak for everyone there, but to me, it's a Band-Aid. And I realize we fought hard, the county fought hard, but there again, the long term is going to be the state legislature, and this indexing and so on. So if we're going to put a few more dollars, and I don't like the lobbyist or whatever the case is, but to protect our citizens, we need, and hopefully this next year, but the county, us, and hopefully other counties, we can get them involved. But to me, we need to put our energy in that, because that's the long-term effect for for property taxes for our citizens.
You're absolutely right. But this year, Rick did a phenomenal job, and I will say Rick is better than any lobbyist because they listen to him. And he has really good
No, and
relationships.
that's,
Yeah,
that's fine, but we gotta
So
have
we've
a
worked hard.
collaboration of just more than us, I realize.
and
the
we
county,
do. Yeah. And you know what? Yeah, we do, and we will, and I agree. Okay. So that was that. It's pretty quiet, but it is what it is. Okay, Kelly, thank you for joining us. So this is our ICRIMP claims update, as it says on our agenda, and I'm always anxious to hear the update and met recently with Kelly. Thank you.
Good morning, Mayor, Council. Thanks for having me here this morning. It's good to see you all. I won't read this entire document. This is a takeaway for you to study later on, just so you can get an idea of City of Nampa's claims analysis. So what I did is, a while back, I met with Mayor and Rick, and we went over a 5-year history, but we wanted to get a smaller snapshot for you, so I did a 3-year history for you. And this is really a tool for you to help review the claims that you've had by overall coverage type and then by each department, and then some loss mitigation tools that you all can implement and use to reduce your claims in the future. So the claims period that I did an analysis was 2018 through 2021, so the last 3 years. We looked at 221 claims to include your general liability claims, police liability claims, property, mechanical breakdown, all of your auto, and employment practices. Nampa has been a valued member of ICRIMP since 2001. And you also have $289 million in property. So when we look at this beautiful City Hall, the Civic Center, and all those properties that you have, that's a lot of property. Your premium the last year was $689,134, so that's looking really good. On the second page, we're going to dive into your 3-year history. So overall, the last 3 years, ICRIMP has spent approximately $745,781 to support all of your claims. Now, you can see from these graphs here, in 2019, you had 75 claims, and this is overall. This is combined by coverage type. In 2020, you had 84, and then in 2021, we had a significant drop, so that looks really, really good from a loss standpoint. So that's everything combined. On the second half of this page, we've got a 3-year history by coverage type. So where is Nampa really seeing your claims? What types of claims are you having? Your top losses are related to auto accidents, 81 claims there, and this is every department combined on this chart. Secondarily, you've got property, and this is by values. General liability, so that would include the sewer backups, the potholes, the signage on the streets, the slip and falls, things of that nature. 1 employment claim, and then 15 police liability. The highest property claims that we did see were related to a fire that occurred at Lions Park Playground, and then some wind damage at the Ford Idaho Center. And you can stop me with any questions at any time. On the next page, then, we've got a 3-year history by department. So we break down the losses by department. Which departments do we really need to focus on, and where can we help? From left to right, we've got your water department, not too bad there. 1 in HR. Police, we're always going to see a lot of claims in the police and law enforcement area. And this is a combination, again, of auto, property, liability, and employment claims all combined. I do understand that the fire department is no longer with the City of Nampa, so you'll see some relief there with claims in that area. Building maintenance, $29,348. We had a few at parks. Irrigation and sewer wastewater, surprisingly low there. And then the streets department, $179,904 and 71 claims. And a lot of those, the ones I did look at in the last 3 years, involved, the snow plows, them clearing the streets of snow, some unmarked intersections, and you had alluded to the signage or the street lights or something like that where people aren't aware that construction may be happening and we have an accident. On the second half here, We break down further by auto claims, since that was your highest category. Auto claims with a 3-year history, wonderful, wonderful here by frequency of claims, going down to just 14 in 2021. So that's fairly steady, that significant decline in 2021. We did have 2 substantial claims involving the fire department that comprise almost the entire cost for 2021. So just 2 claims make up that total dollar amount, but that was from the fire department. On the next page there, we'll go into a little bit more detail of your auto claims by department. Again, no surprise, police would be the majority of those. Streets, 45,059 and 8. Pretty low numbers there across the board by your other departments.
So Mayor, question, I understand police are, when we talk about auto claims, are these damaged police vehicles or?
It is both, yes. So damage to police vehicles and then other citizen vehicles. So the majority of the claims do stem from the police department. However, I will note that 34% of those auto claims were not their fault. So while they did have more claims, 34% of them were not at-fault accidents. So that's a good thing. So, you know, you can kind of look at it one way or the other. They'll be involved in those high-speed pursuits, and oftentimes we'll see a situation where they may be pulled over on the side of the road and someone hits them, or they fail to yield and they have an accident. So there are a couple ways to look at it.
Okay, so help me with the 34 that were not police fault. Are we still having to pay out?
Yes, so this would total all of those claims in total, but then we do subrogate on your behalf. So any monies that we recover on your behalf is applied to this amount. So if it was not an at-fault accident, we would still work with that other insurance company to recover those monies, if they had insurance.
Thanks.
Any other questions on those?
Mayor Kling?
Did you have a bunch of?
I do. No, I think I might have wrecked one.
I thought we would be helped.
One police car, that's about it, but it wasn't my fault, right, Jason? He was driving. So when I see the payout here is how much are the local insurance agencies of the other drivers or of who caused the accident, how much are they paying ICRIMP or are they paying the city?
They pay ICRIMP. So we are your insurance carrier, so any repairs or things like that that we make on your behalf, then our adjusters go after that insurance company and we recover those monies and then deposit it back into that claim.
I see, because I don't see those numbers in here.
They're all total. So total paid plus any recoveries are equal this amount.
Oh, okay.
If you'd like to see recoveries, that's certainly something that we can
It
look
kind of
for.
gives you an idea as to where we at, how much we're paying out, and
Oh, you bet.
and but irregardless of all what we're having to pay ICRIMP, it's still the same regardless of what accidents there are or what the city is having to adjust to, right?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. Second half of this page, we go year by year by department. So fire department, 2019 through 2021, you can see the dollars associated to those. Police, again, just a couple of larger claims in the police category for 2021 at $87,503. And please remember that if you total a vehicle or something like that, can be $30,000 to $40,000 just for one unit. So one accident can really drive up that cost. Parks from 2019 to 2021, not very many there. Streets also, nothing for 2018. And then water, also very low. So a 3-year comparison by department. I dove a little bit further for you on the next page to see what's really causing all of these accidents. And as I stated, 34% of those police accidents were not the fault of the police department. So you can see that 64% total of those auto claims involved where one of your vehicles were struck by someone else. So If we go from that bottom and then work our way around clockwise, we can see that 4% involved a vehicle striking a fixed object, something easily mitigated. Then we have 4% there, backing. Another one, I like to use the example of the goal, get out and look. It's very simple to just, before you take off, get out, walk around the car, takes 10 seconds, nothing's there, and they don't back into another city vehicle, an employee's vehicle, or a curb or bumper or some object that magically appeared. 15% pit maneuvers, $48,032 associated with pit maneuvers. So when we're doing high-speed pursuits and things of that nature. And then 4% theft. Not too bad. Over the last 3 years, again, 15% of those police auto-related accidents were due to pit maneuvers, and EVOC training can really assist in reducing those driving-related accidents. I'm sure that your police department participates in EVOC training and emergency vehicle operator courses. And then I do want to note that we did launch a distracted driving course online, and to date, kudos to Rick and his team for assigning that course to your employees. 55 have completed the NSC distracted driving course sponsored by iCrimp. This is a limited series that we've released, and I was very pleased to see the high participation number. And I ask that you assign that training to those people that are driving more than 50% for their job. So the ones running around and delivering in facilities and streets crews, I was really pleased to see that they took advantage of that. Any questions there? Okay, next we'll talk about general liability claims, and that would involve, again, those negligent acts alleged against your agency by a third party. So the last 3 years of your claims are most related to premises defects, streets. We see a lot of claims for potholes, manholes, things like that. Most of the time, they amount to zero. So while you may see many claims related to those departments, the payout is not that much. $59,193 associated with streets, again, signage, snow plows, manholes, potholes, and then the water department, $73.80. This would be flooding, sewer backups, things of that nature. The $13,667, those were mainline breaks or pipe bursts. So I would encourage those departments to really do some investigating and calling the dig line before they start digging up things or excavating. We see that very frequently. And then sewer, $7,128. On the bottom there, general liability, 3 years again by department, broke those out for you. Irrigation, very low numbers there. Again, you'll see streets high. I will tell you that 2021 number, the $52,732, one large loss comprises almost the entire amount of that category. Okay, so while it can look very inflated, sometimes it can just be one very large loss. Again, sewer, 3738. Very good numbers here. Very, very impressive numbers. All right, and then on the last page, on the top there, risk management services that iCrimp has had or offered to City of Nampa. We've provided sample policies, some ADA guidance. I had the pleasure of doing some facilities inspections with Rick and some of your other employees walking through the Ford Idaho Center, the Nampa Civic Center, this building, and everything looked wonderful. I know Rick teases me about using you guys as examples in some of our presentations when we're showing pictures. We show the good and the bad and the great strides that agencies make to mitigate their losses. We've had great HR consultation with your staff. And then again, kudos to you for those 55 that have to date taken the distracted driving course. We have been out and provided 10 law enforcement trainings to your agency, so that includes everything from officer safety, use of force and de-escalation techniques, mental health awareness in dealing with citizens and people that they're transporting. So really pleased to see that your agency is working with iCrimp in helping you reduce those. The bottom here is just a loss mitigation plan of action for you, things that you can do to improve your losses in the future in each category that we talked about. Property, total facilities management program, walking through everything, making sure it's in good repair, having a maintenance plan. Essential to have that snow removal plan. We've seen a lot of snow collapses and things of that nature on roofs, but I think everything's looking really good for you guys. In the auto liability category, I would really encourage you, if you're not doing it already, to have a great vehicle use policy, to have motor vehicle record checks on pre-employment. So when you're getting ready to hire someone, that you run their driver's license, make sure they actually have a valid driver's license, and that, they haven't gotten into any trouble while they've been in your employ. Again, participating in that distracted driver training should be mandatory for new hires, and then if someone has had an accident. Thirdly, the general liability category. We've talked extensively about annual maintenance on your sewer lines and making sure that they're following those jetting procedures and having a schedule. I know, Mayor Kling, you'd mentioned that you're focusing on updating the infrastructure however many miles per year, and that is wonderful. That's exactly what we like to see, is having an actual plan in place where we can tackle those aging infrastructures. And lastly, police liability. Again, kudos to your law enforcement for already working with our risk manager, Chad Sarmento, in continuing those law enforcement trainings. It's invaluable. If you have any questions, please let me know. I'm happy to help answer.
Mayor Kelly, thank you for the report. The one thing with iCrimp, and it seems like it's been a while, but I lose track of time. Seems like we haven't had personnel litigation update for a while. Is that something that?
It's been a little bit, but we could certainly schedule an executive session.
And I realize
which-
as far as public, those type of things, you're not going to have it in this report, but I would be
Correct.
interested in an update.
Certainly.
And Jamie does such a great job with that, but just how we stand in that area.
You bet.
We can add an executive session for that piece of it.
Yeah, we'd be happy to
Do
do
you
it.
handle that end of it, or is that someone else?
I would contact your adjuster that works on that
Okay.
area for you, and then we would come together and we can present to you your claims in executive session. Mhm.
And we've got, so you've got a couple of different entities, yes. And so we can add that to an executive session sometime soon.
You bet.
Are there any other questions? Kelly, thank you so much. I always look forward to when we get together and do an annual update. And Rick is our liaison, and then the clerk's office also. They work collaboratively with iCrimp on any claims that come in. And then Rick is also the one that's reaching out to our employees to ensure that we have a discount. And I don't know if you want to mention that. There is a discount with iCrimp
There
for
is.
completing certain things, and I believe we've achieved it the last 2 years.
You
Is that
have.
correct?
Yes, you have. So participation in the risk discount program involves many things. Doing the cyber liability assessments, doing the property liability avoidance assessment. So we ask a series of questions to see what policies and procedures you have in place. There are a number of those that help you achieve a discount as high as up to 5%, I want to say. So it's a substantial amount. When you're talking almost $700,000 in premium, doing those things really helps. And we really appreciate and value that.
And we do too. And so Rick is the one that's pushing these out and tracking those with iCrimp to ensure that we get the discount. And I think we're there this year. I tell you, the Know Before, iCrimp implemented the Know Before program, which is a cybersecurity program. We've actively participated in it. We also, you saw it in a budget request with some of the ARPA dollars for the Zero Trust implementation within the city, because the cyber risk is massive. And I really appreciate the work that we're doing as a city to protect ourselves, make sure we're backed up and that we don't get caught in the cyber thing. But it began really with iCrimp, with the Know Before, and I have appreciated that. It's been good.
Mayor, just one thing. This has nothing to do with you, Kelly, or iCrimp, but just we talked about the budget earlier. And so this is very helpful, what we're doing to prevent, but also prevention. And this is with Jamie and so on, as far as on our health insurance. You said our health insurance is in standing, is pretty good. But what we're doing to keep our Yeah, employees, as far as not, submitting claims and so on to prevent, to help them with their health area. I know we have a lot of employees, but I would like an update on that sometime too.
Okay. That's great. We have a great wellness program, and I tell you.
That's what I meant, was trying to come up with wellness program. Okay.
As I listen and sit on some other boards and listen in the budgeting process, the percent of increase, many of them are experiencing a 12% increase in health insurance rates. And we have done such a great job. We are flat this
Way to
year.
go.
And that is a massive savings to the city. So we're doing good. You know what, but it takes a lot of effort, and it takes a team that's working together, that's communicating, and accidents do happen, and you just wish they never did. But
do.
it is what it is, and with police, it's the nature of the job that they do. And, yeah,
And kudos to you. I mean, not everything can be prevented. We understand that. And sometimes things happen, and we just do our best to get out and look, to be proactive, to not click that link, to, make sure everything's going well, and we're here to help you with any of those.
So Mayor, I'm prolonging, but how do we, how do we compare to other municipalities that you deal with a lot of municipalities. Are we doing fairly well?
You are doing very well.
Okay.
Kelly, thank you so much.
You're most welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, council, that is the conclusion of our meeting. One thing I will say is that each month, we have so much to cover. And I think we do have quite a bit more with planning and zoning and discussions to be had. Is there anything, I would love to hear from you if you have suggestions for how you want this meeting done any differently than it is. So please reach out to me, reach out to Rick, but I would love to talk to you personally if there's something that you would like done differently, or if there's something that you feel like needs to be on the agenda that isn't.
We discussed, some items at the last council meeting, so those are in the minutes, so if those could come up in the near future.
Yes, yes, and we are working, we discussed those afterwards too, so, yep. Okay, if there's nothing else, I'd stand for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.